This is a very convivial crowd, but I'm going to ask for your attention now. Thank you. Distinguished guests, it is now my pleasure to introduce Vanessa Friedman, who will be in conversation with our honoree, Stuart Weitzman. Vanessa Friedman, a graduate of Princeton, where I'm pleased to note she studied history, was named the fashion director and chief fashion critic for the New York Times in March 2014. In this role, she leads global fashion coverage for both the New York Times and International New York Times on all platforms. Before joining the paper, Ms. Friedman was the inaugural fashion editor of the Financial Times beginning in 2003. Along with editing the style pages and Luxury 360 vertical, she wrote a weekly column for the Saturday FT and created the FT's annual Business of Luxury conference. I expect that at least some of her talent is inherited, as her very fashionable parents are with us today. But not just today, at so many programs and events here at New York Historical where they are active members of our Chairman's Council. With that, it is now my pleasure to turn it over to Stuart and Vanessa.
We're getting our own platform here. Okay.
Thank you. Okay, while we're being arranged, I'll just say thank you to Pam and Louise. It is a real honor to be here and to share the stage with someone as talented as Stuart Weitzman, and to be in a room with as many stylish people as are seated here today. So, Stuart.
I know you're going to surprise me with questions. I kind of like that. So don't feel limited.
All right, so we're going to talk for about 20 minutes, and then we're going to have a 15-minute Q&A opportunity where everyone here can ask Stuart surprising questions. And as Pam said, my parents are here, and I grew up in a family that believes in the Socratic method. So if you guys don't ask questions, I will call on you. And Betsy Cohen, I know where you are. Okay, so Stuart, let's start. Louise, I think, was quite smart to put us together because what you may not know is that I did not grow up thinking I would ever be in fashion, and as I understand it, neither did you.
Exactly.
You actually were at Wharton, as I understand.
Yeah, I was planning to break that bank on Wall Street.
So what happened?
Well, this is kind of a cute story. You want me to tell the story?
Tell the story.
Can I have your menu, please?
All right, this is interactive.
It is. While at college, I roomed in the fraternity house with a fellow whose father owned a company in Brooklyn that made shoes. They actually made the Margaret Gerald shoes for Jerry Miller that was sold at Bendel's and other things. They didn't own those brands, but they were contract manufacturers. And the father was not a designer, but a wonderful shoemaker, and for his own collection, he would buy sketches. And my hobby was drawing, never Picasso level. I was smart enough to know I wasn't making a career of that. But my friend said, you know, you ought to draw some shoes. My dad buys sketches, and maybe he'd like some of yours. So I got a copy of his catalog to see who he was really catering to, and I drew 20 sketches. And he, my friend, and he invited me over for dinner one evening, and I brought them, kind of laid them out as you would a deck of cards, and he picked one up. And he looked at it. Now, I'm like 20 years old. I'm not prepared for him, I can tell you. And he said, who'd you copy this from? Well, that was a challenge. I didn't copy it, so I was on safe ground. And I told him that. And then he put it up to the light like you would if you wanted to trace something. I think I see an impression outlining, who did you trace this from? And I didn't. And I told him that, and he kind of shook his head, and he tore my sketch up. Now, imagine the 15 seconds before something else was about to happen, right? And he threw it on the floor, and finally, he picked up another sketch. I have no idea at the time what he's going to say, and I don't want to think about it, but he flipped it over to the blank side and said, "Draw that for me again," which I did, and he gave me $20 a sketch.
What did it look like? I want to know what the shoe looked like.
I'll draw it for you.
Do you remember?
Yes, I do. That one he tore up, I remember, because he didn't pay for it. He gave me $380 instead of $400, which he should have given me. And at the time, the Wharton School tuition, for all of you who have kids at school, I'm sorry to remind you, was $4,000 a year. And I had just made 10% of that in 30 minutes. I put Goldman Sachs on hold, and I said, I'm going to try this. And my sketches ended up in Mirrer on 57th and 5th, one of the best shoe store at the time in New York. It's now Bulgari. And I couldn't get over that women were buying what I drew, and that's why I'm in the shoe business.
So did you actually graduate from Wharton, or did you immediately leave and go into shoes?
No,
This is my calling.
For the next year and a half, he paid me over $3,000. I never told my dad. My dad paid the tuition, and I went to the racetrack. And I also didn't tell Uncle Sam, because I always believed designers never had to pay taxes
So
until I got caught.
Do you pay taxes now?
Now I do, yeah.
So when did you decide to actually go out on your own?
You know, I would even recommend, I do when I talk at schools, work for someone for a while. Boy, can you learn mistakes that you can avoid. And I did that for about 5 years with a company called Caressa. I proposed, and they accepted starting a higher price group division. And after a while, they made the mistake, and I negotiated well that it had my father's brand name, because he had retired and closed the business in America, and I had sold it to Caressa, and it was Mr. Seymour by Stuart Weitzman, and I owned my name. And that was their mistake. And I took it away with me. In 1986, Stuart Weitzman alone became the brand. So
Poor Mr. Seymour.
yeah, my dad, but his shoes are in the exhibit, though, some I had never seen before.
So when it became your name alone, your name over the door, did you have a mission in mind for what you were going to stand for what shoes were going to mean that you made?
Well, remember, this was my hobby, too. I ended up working at my hobby. And my business background played a key role. I never had a business partner. I was the creative director and the CEO. And I knew what I had to do from a business standpoint. So I had my plan. I wanted to sell most of you who are in this room today. And I did that for about 10 to 15 years and really perfected comfort and fit, as well as the look of contemporary shoes. You know, you don't know how good it's going to feel when it's on the shelf. We have to lure you to take it off and try it on, so it has to look good. But you never know where a great idea comes from. At a dinner, it was a wedding, 5 couples were at my table. One of them I didn't know, and that couple had their daughter who was a college student. And as I introduced myself to the people I didn't know, and their daughter, the daughter said to me, "Oh," she said, "Stuart Weitzman, I know your shoes. My mother wears them." You can appreciate how that hit me, right? And that changed my business. I decided to add another attitude. I called Mario. May he rest in peace, as we say. He was the greatest photographer at the time. Convinced him that he could do something no one had ever done before. He wanted no part of shoes. He was, on the runway, Vogue and all, whatever. Mario Testino. But he did say he'll do it. I kind of played to his ego that you'll be the first one to really do something great for footwear, fashion, photography. Oh, yeah, okay, but I want to control it. That's, of course, why I went to him. I'm not going to be able to get Kate Moss to model shoes. And he brought me Kate Moss, and then Giselle and Gigi. But Kate was the right attitude. And here I had, at that time, the perfect iconic model for girls in college or just out of college. But I didn't have the product. And that's what I mean by you never know when a great idea came. And the biggest mistake, right, is putting the wrong product on the right girl. We know the St. John story with Angelina. So I had to create for her, and she was my inspiration. I had 3 months, and I made the 50-50 boot, which a lot of you probably know. Some of you even talked to me how many you own. And I made the thigh-high boot to fit like a piece of clothing, not to fit like Julia Roberts' boot in Pretty Woman, which you would never wear, but the same position on the leg. And that changed our company.
Mm-hmm. Now, I think, as Louise said earlier, as Pam said, that I very much believe that clothing, when it works, works because it hits a button in women, or men for that matter, that has to do with identity, with your place in the world, with your aspiration for yourself and where you want your place in the world to be. So, when you think about that, were you thinking about that? Were you thinking about, who your customer was and where she was going when you were making shoes? Or you were just thinking, ooh, Kate Moss, she's cool?
No, I wanted that marketplace. So, of course, I was thinking of that category in addition to what had become second nature for me to design for her mother, so to speak. So, I've invented muses in my mind over my career, maybe a dozen of them. Marilyn Monroe was always one, and so was Audrey Hepburn. Two ladies at the same time with totally different attitudes in how to express themselves in clothing. I love Marilyn, as simple as she was, that her... Probably only shoe men know this, but now you will as well. Her wonderful quote, give a girl a great pair of shoes and she will conquer the world. That's Marilyn. On the other hand, Audrey Hepburn and Jackie Kennedy at the time, they didn't need a shoe to tell anything about themselves. They wore flats before flats were around. Today, they're 80% of the business. So their confidence was shown in the kind of footwear that I saw on them. And Marilyn needed footwear and clothing to make her who she wasn't, perhaps. I always thought of that, and in this exhibit that's here, you can see it all through the ages. For those of you who don't know, the high heel was made popular in fashion by a man, a king, Louis XIV, who had to be taller than anyone else in his court. I think it was 4 or 5 inches high. So it's not only you who could figure out how to wear it, you see. Although, what do we say? Women are so much stronger, they can dance backwards and in high heels. That kind of attitude of footwear has been all throughout history.
Now, you talked about the importance of comfort. Did you ever actually try on any of the shoes you made?
I am so glad my wife isn't here to hear the answer to this. But we have a flat last, of course, as mannish fashion is stylish today, and it's always part of the collection. And I do make some shoes for myself on that last. But I know you're referring to the kind of heels you're wearing, and why would we put you through that? But we're not putting you through that. You had a lot of choices before you put that shoe on. So if you have a complaint, it isn't me.
Speaking about that, I mean, one of the things that often men, sometimes women, say about women's shoes and women who wear women's high heels is that they are, instruments of torture. It's like a favorite phrase. And that it is something that reveals the way that women victimize themselves in the service of beauty, or their pursuit of beauty, or the pursuit of the male gaze. Do you buy into any of that, or do you think that's just an old-fashioned idea?
Listen, we know there are girls who will suffer to wear a shoe, and at the award ceremonies, they're always made higher than we ever offer them to the public. There's something about
how high?
that.
What do they do?
5 inches, and we won't really sell a shoe that's over 4.5 inches, but we can't get it on them if it's not 5 inches. They know it makes the leg look great and the body look wonderful, and they're out there being photographed, and until someone invents something better than that the high heel will always be with us, I'm sure. So yeah, there's a bit of it, but it also is a power play, isn't it? And probably some of you saw Disclosure with Demi Moore, and Michael Douglas. She was the CEO. He was under her in more ways than one, and if you remember the movie. And in every scene, she was in a sky-high heel. Now, whoever dressed her did that for a reason, gave her the power to be the CEO. It's not as necessary today because women are freer in their choices, and as I said, 80% of the shoes are flats. But that lingers, and at least in my career, it has always been there.
Well, certainly our current First Lady is always in a sky-high heel. Let's talk about the collection for a second. There are about 100 shoes upstairs. How many shoes do you actually have?
Over the years, collected about 300. I tried to get the whole museum, but Louise would only give me one room, so we had to pick the best of the best. And they do tell some terrific stories. I encourage you to read the little stories about them as you go through, because they do tell us about women.
And what was your criteria for what you collected?
Well, they had to be good looking. And my wife did most of the selecting as gifts for me. But my inspiration to her was, maybe you can find designs that inspire me to make something today. They should tell a story. They should be something we can talk about, not just a shoe. And fortunately, for those who collect women's shoes, the best made ones, the most expensive in the time, are the ones that lasted because they were preserved in the families through the generations. And shoes traditionally just worn around the street found their way into the garbage can, I suppose. And those that didn't are the ones that we collected, and others as well. Enjoyed doing it, and I'm sure I had some winners because of the inspirations from them.
Why is it that this is the first time they've been exhibited for the public? You've been hoarding them?
I never thought of showing them, and a dear friend, the president of Sotheby's at the time, David Redden, knew Louise, introduced me to her. She was inquisitive about what I do in my world of footwear fashion, and I guess I brought these shoes up and let's show them, and that was how it happened, without a plan, which is sometimes how the best things happen.
Do you think shoes get their due in the public eye, or do you think they're too often dismissed as kind of frivolous accessories?
No, well, they're not frivolous accessories always. We all know that there are women who wear shoes that enter the room before they do, and that are still in the room when you've left. And I'm not talking about your shoes.
Thank you.
Okay. And then there are shoes you don't notice at all. And that's the beauty of taste and the variance in personalities of women. We can make from a flip-flop to a high heel evening sandal and boots and everything in between. Guys, we wear 2 or 3 kinds of things, in particular right now, sneakers. So women's footwear is an expression. I mean, Vanessa, who is the first hero you ever met? Forget your parents.
Justice William J. Brennan.
No, it was Cinderella.
It was not Cinderella for me.
Oh, okay. Well, for most of you, it was Cinderella. And it wasn't Cinderella, actually, who was the hero. It was her shoes. And then Dorothy with her red shoes and took her to fantasy land. And these 6- and 8-year-old kids, are we brainwashing them? Maybe Charles Perrault did when he wrote Cinderella, but he didn't have it in mind. And there's a cultural aspect to them that has grown over the years. And like Lincoln said, you can't fool everybody all the time. Some of the time, yes, and some of the time, but never all the time. So it had to last, and it did. And footwear is a great part of our culture. We've heard it 100 times.
All right, I have one final question, and then we'll open it up to you guys. We are in what fashion reporters often refer to as a shoe moment. You know, there is actually a 96,000 square foot shoe store in Dubai. It's called the Shoe Level.
Shoe Level, yeah.
Shoe Level. You know, every department store in New York City is opening up a bigger and bigger and bigger shoe department. Do you think this is going to go on, and why is it happening?
Well, I don't think it's a shoe moment. When hasn't it gone on? Do you remember when Saks built a zip code shoe floor, and everyone then had to follow and make it look that way as well? Shoes are here for you, and you all love them. And they're easy to wear, they're easy to buy compared to expensive clothing, and they say so much about you. You can use them in so many ways that I think what you might see as a shoe moment is a shoe forever.
Okay, I lied. I have one more question. What about the sneaker?
Yeah, well, that's part of footwear, and it's the wonderful thing about fashion is that it's always changing and being reinvented or invented. And the sneaker world, which is now half of the industry, I guess you know that, is giving tremendous life to the men's side in particular, but also to the women. And men, just let me tell you, because a lot of people ask me, why haven't I ever made men's shoes? Last year, and it's a very accurate statistic, how many were sold and how many guys are in America? 1.5 pair of footwear, that's what men bought. How many pair do you think, not you, Vanessa, but the average woman in America, how many pair do you think she bought?
10?
13. So those of you who only bought 9, you got some catching up to do. But 13 pair of footwear a year.
That's a lot of shoes.
That's a lot of business.
Okay, all right, now we are going to open this up to questions.
Okay, first of all, thank you very, very much. I have to tell my husband, I think I have a pair or two to catch up with. So thank you for that statistics, and thanks very much to Stuart and Vanessa. So we're going to have, as Vanessa has said, we're going to take questions from all of you. Please wait until the microphone comes to you before you ask your question, and please speak into the microphone when you do ask your question. Thank you.
Question on your right.
Could you tell us where the shoes are made? They're made in the United States or abroad?
There are no shoes, practically speaking, being made in the USA today. It's an industry that has completely closed. There are a couple of men's shoe factories. There's a work boot factory in Georgia. There's some little boutiques hand-making shoes in LA and, like sandals on the street. But all of footwear today is made either in China, Italy, or Spain. And anything other than that is minuscule. But most of them made by either American or Italian companies.
We have another question over here on your left.
Yes. As I mentioned to you, I alternate between my 50-50 boots and my 3 pair of suede thigh-high boots that you make. But I wanted to ask you a question about copywriting the designs, because fashion is sort of well known for the inability to actually copyright designs. How do you deal with that issue, and how do you prevent copies of your designs?
I've learned to live with that. In the infinite wisdom of our Congress, and we know how smart they can be, they did decide in the 30s that fashion should not be exclusively for the wealthy, and that the whole world, all of America, should be able to buy pretty things. And they refused to include footwear and fashion in general in copyright design, as they did books and music, etc. We can trademark something if it becomes part of our trademark, but we have to do it almost before we know it's any good. We have to do it within a year. We don't often bother with that, but it has helped our industry. We move quicker. We have to think faster. And what the age-old compliment is, if they don't copy you, what are you doing wrong, right? I mean, it's a compliment to be copied. And I will tell you this, if Payless has all those boots, you're not walking in there to buy them. I know you're not. Nobody here is. We don't really care. If a competitor is copying me or me with them, which I don't do, and generally we won't because it's too embarrassing, regardless of the business possibilities, that would bother us. But that rarely happens. It's always a marketplace that we're not catering to. So in the end, it's a non-starter for us.
One of the things that I think has been interesting recently in this area is that because of social media, copies are being called out much faster and much more publicly than they ever were before, because there was no real recourse to get that information out before. And now, there's actually a whole, website devoted to this called Diet Prada. But I'm constantly in a feed getting, some picture of one shoe, picture of a shoe from a different brand, same shoe.
Yeah, actually, magazines do stories on how you can buy it for $800 or $69. There's a website, the copies of the 50/50. There are over 270 out there. That's okay. I mean, it's a great boot, and you want it. You've got the money and the taste. You're gonna buy it from me, and they continue to do that. So we all live with that, and it's okay.
You sound very centered.
Question on your left.
Well, this is not a question, it's a statement, which is going to make you very happy. I have a 21-year-old, fabulously hot, beautiful granddaughter who loves your shoes.
Thank you.
And especially the fact that you also make them in narrow, and she has a narrow foot, and not many other designers have narrows. So.
Yeah, for all the double A's out there.
Question on your right.
Can you tell us a little bit about the economics of footwear? So you sell a shoe for $400. What does it cost to make that shoe, and how do you set the price of the shoe?
Are you sure you really want to know the answer to that? I don't think you do.
I want to know.
Well, you probably do know. Well, you have to bear in mind all the costs involved, the markdowns, but generally a fashion product will sell anywhere from 4 times its manufacturing cost to 12 times its manufacturing cost. Anything more than that is a fluke, maybe a one-off item, and anything lower that wouldn't be able to support itself. Having said that, Zara has changed the landscape. They buy a shoe for $40 and they sell it for $80 in their stores. Nobody does that but them.
We have a question front and center.
Can we just elaborate on that for 1 second? Zara can do that mostly because they own their own production facilities, right?
No.
Why?
They can do it because they have 5,000 stores. They work on a very low margin, and what they have eliminated is the sale. They have a 3 or 4 or 5% markdown, whereas a brand like, selling at Barney's and Saks and Bergdorf's like we do, would have a 25% markdown.
Yeah, a lot of the price, the exponential, has to do with department stores, right, with wholesaling.
Yeah, and that, no, retailing, not wholesale. I'm giving you retail.
Wholesaling and then retailing.
Yeah, so when that $400 shoe, maybe you bought it for, it really doesn't sell for $400. On average, it would sell for $285 when you add in the discount prices and the full prices. So that changes the multiple considerably.
As one of the few men sitting in this room with 200 women, if you recall, the 16th, 17th, and 18th century shoes for men were far more stylish than they are today. Everybody's wearing the wingtip shoe today for 50 years.
I see you haven't bought the sneakers yet, have you?
Oh. But I don't think sneakers go very well with a tuxedo or with a blue suit or anything like that. I know it does with 25 and 30-year-olds, but I passed that. Also, when I see in a particular building that I'm in, I see women who are wearing 5- and 6-inch heels, but some of them are brilliant. They have platforms, which makes it seem so much more comfortable for women. Why is that eliminated now?
It's a fashion item.
But aren't shoes a fashion item?
Yes, but fashion means it goes out of style and something else comes in.
Nobody's bringing it back in.
It's just left.
It went with Carmen Miranda.
We made platforms for the past, I guess, 15 years, on and off strongly until maybe a year or 2 or 3 ago. And then the wedge platform, which was part of it, was there. And now the shoe is lighter and cleaner, and our eyes are adjusting to it. And somehow, some way, the platform will find its place because it's a functional item and it works. And we have always found in our business that if something is right in look and in trend or in fashion and also functions, we have a field day selling it. If it doesn't function, it doesn't last long.
Question on your right.
Similar to the Zara comment you made, I'm curious if there are other disruptors happening right now, not that you called it that, but whether it's Rothy's or Allbirds or some of these brands that aren't even trying to have any physical location, if it's changing the landscape.
Well, they have that location. It's on the web. That's the biggest physical location today. Half our shoes around the world are sold on the internet, and 10 years ago, none were. So yes, they have a big impact, and they're catering to a younger generation who isn't brand interested or brand savvy enough to matter to those kind of brands. They are very small, and they have their niche, and some will grow to be big, and some will become parts of maybe Adidas and Nike and others who can exponentially make them an important factor in fashion. And that's the wonderful thing about the fashion industry. It is always changing, and there's always opportunity. It is colorblind. It is race blind. It has been forever. Whoever had the opportunity, I mean, you know, Vanessa, some of the best designers in footwear in the world aren't from Italy today. They may end up there making their product. But wherever the talent is, the public finds it when it comes to fashion. And that's one of the reasons I've loved this industry. It's colorblind.
We have another question on your left.
I'm curious to know what kind of process you go through to ensure that shoes will be comfortable or comfortable for some buyers. And do you take shoes out of production that you deem will not be comfortable?
Boy, I could have hired you to ask that question. The principal DNA of my company from the day I started it was a recognition that I needed to make these shoes, relatively speaking, as comfortable as they can be. I say relatively because a high heel will not fit like a sneaker, and a mid heel will fit better than a high heel just by nature. But it should fit better than the other mid heels in the markets or the other marketplace or the other high heels. And I have been very lucky to have a woman with me for the 38 years I built this business who became the approver of every shoe. She's also technologically so sound in how to make a shoe and fix the last and change the cut so that it didn't fall on the wrong part of the foot, the nerve area, where the strap had to hit. And she has tried on, she retired this year, 400,000 shoes. That's 40,000 designs I've created. 10 times each one is tested on average. The nudist sandal, do you know the nudist sandal? 19 times. And I said higher priced people will not copy higher priced shoes. That's the exception, as you know. When you see a picture of a girl on the red carpet, you could bet 75% of the time it's in the nudist style, which is single front band, ankle strap. That's the name we gave the shoe. Most of the time it's ours, but it can be anybody's today because there's so much demand for it that everyone decided, the heck with my reputation, I'm copying it also. But we test them. And if it doesn't work, it's out of the line. And if it's so beautiful, it has to be redesigned so that it works. I'm going to tell you a little fact that is, it's relevant to probably everybody who advertises. In order for me to get you into my store or into a Stuart Weitzman shoe in someone else's store, the first time, what do you think it cost me? Anyone want to throw out a number?
Come on, someone guess.
I wish.
$300. That'd be a steal.
$8,000. When I add up all of my advertising, all of my publicity, and I divide it by the number of new customers who've come in to try on that one of those 10 shoes we might have put out in the public, That's the cost. What do you think it cost me the second time? Right. Now, I'm going to make it not fit? No way. That's the business side. You see, that's the CEO side. I am not going to have you, first of all, you'll never come back and you'll tell your friends and they won't come. No. It's going to work, and it's an economic issue why it works. And I just described it to you.
Question on your right.
Okay, one last question.
What is your most popular selling style shoe? And who is it addressed to, especially the ones with the very, very high heels, which is not from my age group?
So you don't want me to talk about your age group, is that right? And I think when you said style, you mean type of shoe or a specific design? Type of shoe. It's the pump. It's one of those shoes every woman, all you have to look at your friends, and 60, 70% are in some sort of pump. It's the shoe that's perfect to wear anywhere almost, and it's an outfit saver. It probably was 80, 90% of the demand a few years ago. Now it's maybe 50 to 60 because the boot has also become one of those perfect items that you have to find, and you'll then have many, many uses for it. So between the boot and the pump, you can cover 250 days of the year.
Can we squeeze in one more question?
Sure. One more question
Okay,
on
last
your
question.
right. Hi. Speaking to your two sides, you have to be both a creative and a businessman, and I was wondering if you could mention a time that those two sides of you have been either challenged by each other or fueled, and if you have any advice for someone who works in a creative field and has to protect their creative space.
Well, I think I said this earlier, you're not going to pick it off the shelf unless it looks good. So for a business in my world, you have to make it attractive. You have to make it contemporary. Maybe you want to be on the extreme and make it revolutionary. That's okay also. But if you want the customer to be lifelong, you have to make it work. A shoe has to function. You can take in a jacket. You can let out a sleeve or shorten a sleeve. What are you going to do with a shoe? You're going to suffer or throw it away. And if you want them to throw your shoe away or suffer, don't pay attention to the engineering. But probably, just to give you a number you can put in your head, if 50% of what you're doing is engineering and 50% is design, you're on the right track.
So thank you once again, Stuart and Vanessa. This was a terrific afternoon. We learned a lot, which is always the best thing. And thank you once again to all of you. All of you have one of our public programs brochure at your table. Please take it home. Any of you who aren't members already, please join. Thank you.